I'm Nadira Tudor, and this is The Fall of Kabul, a soldier's story. Was it worth it? Stephen, thank you very much for joining me today. I think I want to start with your memories of that moment that we heard that Kabul had fallen.
I was at home actually with my family, and it was actually my wife who turned and said, "Have you seen this?" And I said, "I probably expected it." And in seconds later, moments later, my phone just started, vibrating and ringing, and friends on text who we'd been out there with for many times. And the strange thing was so many different views of the news. Some positive, some negative, some saying, why, what we were there for, the people that have passed and things like that. So it was mixed emotions from friends that we'd done the same things together, but yet the different views of whether it was a good or bad thing at the time was strange to hear actually, because you thought maybe it'd just be one sense of a view, the same view, because we were all there at the same time, but it wasn't. It was so different, and I found that strange really. I thought everyone would think the same, like, was it worth it? And the questions you'll start asking yourself. But yeah, I think my wife was more emotionally affected by it than I was, having been there, strangely.
And I'm just trying to visualize your phone getting message after message after message. Quite a surreal moment in time, I would think.
Yeah, you don't expect it. Like Terry said, it's just an unexpected surprise to you that it would happen, and actually it would happen so quickly, and then not too soon after, there's photos of people there stood with US aircrafts in the background, and that's how quick it had happened. And I think that picture is probably one that people remember of them final hours and minutes before it was taken. And I know it's probably shared by a lot of people that did we do the right thing? Did we leave at the right time? Did we leave too fast? There's probably so many questions that people are still trying to answer now, and probably will do for a long, long time, especially those people that lost lives and family members there.
I'm going to leave the fall of Kabul for a minute, because actually I kind of need to understand why you joined the army or the military. Did you come from a family where there was a history of people serving? Tell me a bit about yourself, I suppose.
Well, for me, I was 15 years old, late 15-year-old, and my father had a pub. We lived in a pub, and that's where we grew up. And I got to a stage when I'd left school where I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. Educationally, I didn't have too much education from school, and I thought to myself, who am I going to be? What am I going to be when I'm older? The old question that you always get asked as a child. And I never once did I say the military, funnily enough, so it never come to my mind. And I once saw an advert on the TV for the British Army at the time, and I thought, what, that could be me. I like, the fitness side of it got me, because I was always a fit, sporty kind of guy. And I never thought about the seriousness of the military at the time. I just thought it's an out from where I am, although I didn't have a bad upbringing or anything like that. But I thought it's something different. I can make something of myself. And to be honest, I did it mainly to prove people wrong and myself that I can do something on my own without the family helping you along. So that was it. I applied, and the minute I walked through the gates at 16 years old, I knew it was the right place for me straight away, because there were people there that were just from very similar backgrounds to me as an enlisted soldier, from similar areas to me, similar education to me, and from minute dot of the military, my military career, and still now the same people I met on that day one, I still meet every single year now, 24 plus years later. So from day one, I've never, not once have I looked back and said, I wish I'd, done something different with my life. It's the best thing I've ever done. And as Terry said, that the brotherhood, the comradeship that you gain along the way, no, not many other organisations can have that same feeling of a family work environment.
If we continue that theme and go back to Afghanistan, and I don't know how many times you went out there, and I suppose each time that you were deployed there would have been a different experience. And that family theme, and I know this because I've had the privilege to work with the military as a contractor, and I understand that in very short periods of time, you become very close to each other when you're out in the field, certainly, and away from home. And I just want to understand a little bit about the first time you went out there.
I remember when we got, actually we were going to deploy to another theatre. We were training to go to Iraq at the time, and I think a political call was made that actually we're going to change and send my battalion to Afghanistan. So we switched our mindset, switched our training focus to Afghanistan, and we only had, I want to say 6 to 8 weeks of training before we went. Usually, 6 months is, the beat-up training ready to deploy on any tour. So we only had weeks to get ready for this, and I don't think we had time to actually let it sink in where we were going and actually understand what country we were going to and what we were going to expect when we got there. We kind of just did our training, focused, and then we arrived. So the first time off the aircraft in Bastion, and the dry, because it was a summertime, and the dry heat hit you, thinking, wow, we didn't have time to go to our usual place, which is Kenya, to train in a similar arid, dry conditions. We just went from, rainy UK to Afghanistan. So that the weather and the climate change was definitely a shock to most of us, because we were just instantly sweating from the moment we got off. And I remember being so dry and dusty. And then when we first got to the camp where we were going to, and there was very little there, and it's there, you thought, that's us, this is us for the next 6 months of our life. And actually, with the training, it was very good training, but still, personally, I never knew what would I expect when on my first patrol and things like that, and what the local people were going to be like, and whether whether the kids would wave and smile at us being there or not. We didn't really know what was to be expected. So we kind of, first patrol, what you get is usually a familiarisation patrol of the last unit and the change to the new unit. And, we could see that the unit before us had built up a good rapport with the local people. The waves and the smiles were happening. But, you moved a bit further out, and the waves stopped and the smiles stopped. And that's when you knew, it was a serious time, and you needed to be kind of on your game, and you don't know what's around the corner. So in that first patrol was when I realised that, this is going to be tough. This is going to be dangerous for the next 6 months. I want to see the end of my tour. I want to, have a good tour as in being professional. And that was the time I knew that this was serious. This wasn't just another tour I'd done in Northern Ireland or Bosnia or wherever I'd been before. This was on a different level.
But you've just said there, Stephen, that you wanted that tour over from the day of your first patrol, which is a little bit of a contradiction, isn't it? And I just want to highlight this because, again, the short periods of time that I've spent working with the military, I understand that camaraderie a lot, and it is incredible as an external person how your head very quickly changes, and you feel these bonds that you don't feel actually in the civilian world. But you've just gone into immense danger. How does that work? How does that love for what you do work, but actually you could lose your lives here?
I think on a personal level, you're always going to think insular and think family and think, and you have your feelings and thoughts and emotions, and especially as a leader and as a commander out there, you kind of keep that to yourselves. As a man, generally, I keep those to myself anyway. I know we should speak out more and all that kind of stuff, and I'm sure we'll move on to that. The reason I thought that, wow, this is serious, are you going to survive, is because I think the lack of understanding and the training that we got, although sufficient, we wanted more time. Clearly, you know, more time training is beneficial. But I thought at that time that I didn't know how it would turn out and how serious it would get. But I knew from dot one that the training we had conducted would come to fruition, and we would all do the right thing at the right time and be professional as the British military we think we are. So yeah, it was, I think it was just a shock and capture of being in a different zone, a different kind of threat, a real threat. You know, you do a lot of training, you know, and most of the time the bullets aren't coming back, you know, and when the bullets start coming your way, you think, wow, we're in a different world here. You know, this is people's lives where, you know, we're not playing with, but, you know, friends and comrades left and right we're all in danger, and you just want to make sure as a commander on the ground that you are making the right decision, because they've got families at home, and if you make the wrong decision, then there's consequences. And I know it's our job, you know, that's what we're there to do the right job, do the right thing, but as a commander there's a lot of pressure on your shoulders to make sure that your friends, colleagues, comrades are going home at the end of 6 months. So that's when, you know, it gets serious.
And it's complicated, isn't it? Because you also had to form relationships with Afghans, not knowing who was, I don't want to use the word on your side, but who wasn't a threat to you personally and for your colleagues. How did you negotiate your way around this?
I think from, you know, forming relationships with Afghan people, you know, the interpreters that we had embedded in our units, our platoons, you know, there was always a side of you that aired caution, because, you know...
Why?
I think an instinct, a protective instinct that you'd gathered during your training, that, you know, there's such called an insider threat, and that was taught to you that yes, you can trust and bond with them, and they're going to help you, and you want to help them at the same time. But there's always that, you know, you switch off for 1 second and you bring them in a little too close, on a professional level, not a personal level, then, you know, the insider threat is real and you have to be wary of that. So we always had a kind of someone, whether we're meeting and chatting just like this and we had our interpreter there would always be someone, one of our guys or girls, just stood, you know, at the back, just watching, just making sure that no untoward was to happen, and there wasn't that insider threat. And if there was an insider threat, because it's actually happened in Afghanistan, you know, enough times actually, that it wasn't going to happen, you know, on your watch. So as much as I trusted my interpreter and I bonded with my interpreter and I got to know about his family, where he lived, where he'd come from, what he likes to do, and we ate food together, ate bread together, walked on patrols together, spoke together, you know, every day. There's always that 0.01% that you think, you know, the just in case, the what ifs. But from an outside perspective, when we're driving through villages or patrolling through villages, I mean, personally, I never trusted anyone. Not because I didn't want to trust anyone, you know, I wanted to trust everyone. I'd love to go and shake hands with everyone, but the threat was so real and the dangers were so, you know, so high, and the threat was so high at the time, whether it be suicide threat or just a gunman, because you get the intelligence through of what areas you can or are higher threats to you than others, and you kind of, your posture reacts to the threat within villages or towns or whatever it may be. So but on the outside you'd still smile. If your posture was high, you'd still smile and you'd try and wave. But in your mind as a commander and as a soldier, you are always ready for the next corner, for the guy on the mobile phone or the child on the mobile phone, whatever it may be. And you've got to be prepared to do what you've been taught to do, and that's your job. And that comes from the training and then the intelligence report you get before you go out into the world of Afghanistan, villages, towns and streets.
I mean, I've got two questions here.
Yeah.
Talking about that. And my first is, relationships are built on trust.
Mm-hmm.
We all like to think. And being in that dangerous environment, not trusting anyone, and going about your life and your job. And you've mentioned the fact that some interpreters did turn on the people that they were working for. How did that make you feel? And did you know people personally who'd experienced this?
Not personally, no. With kind of the insider threat, but in terms of how it makes you feel, it's probably like I've said. It's a sense of, you know, we thought we were on the same page. We thought we were working together for, you know, the mission ahead and the greater good, let's say. And then when you realise that, you know, somewhere else that the insider threat has happened and then an interpreter has turned and, you know, and killed or injured one of your own, not necessarily British, but, you know, as a coalition, you know, that sends serious doubt into what you thought you knew before that happened. And it also turned, you know, other people around us then become more concerned, if not a little bit angry. So you then have to do the damage limitation of making sure you stay professional and you trust to a certain extent the person you've got in front of your interpreter. And you just need to make sure that your guy that's watching over you while you're having these discussions and you're doing your job, that they're on point and they're doing their job without, you know, the interpreter seeing, because you don't want telling me you don't trust him 100%, that you trust him and you enjoy working with him, he does a good job. And they did fantastic jobs, really did. And we owe a lot to these people. It's just the odd one or two that got turned by, let's say, the Taliban, and were probably forced to do it half the time. They probably didn't want to. They probably trusted us 100%, and unfortunately they got hold of by the other side and probably did it to look after their own families back wherever they were, to be honest. So, you know, I felt for them, felt sorry for them, but again, it wasn't that we didn't like them or didn't enjoy working with them, because we did, but it's just that there's always going to be a sense of what if, and that's what we went on. Our instincts plays a big part on that.
You can understand from an outsider looking in, with this very specific area that we're talking about, the interpreter, the Afghan interpreter, working in their country or the country of their roots, putting their lives on the line for NATO. And there's been a lot of debate, and I don't want to delve into this too much, but obviously because of the threat that you've described, that you are under, it can be deemed as racist, just simply racist. Because from their perspective, they've given everything.
I know I spoke about the trust in country when the threat was real and, you know, right there in our faces. But in terms of interpreters and the Afghan people getting the safety that they required, because they'd put their life and their family's life on the line by helping us do our job against their own people, essentially. So the right thing to do is protect them, because they've protected us for so long. You know, an interpreter gives us early warning from the radio of where the Taliban were at the time, where they were placed, what they were intending to do to our forces, and they gave us the early warning, and they looked after us in not only that way but many other ways. So it's only right that in the end we looked after them. And you know, I know the UK has lots of Afghanis back in the UK and looking after them, homing them and housing them as well. So I think it's right. They deserve it. They've helped us, and we rightly so should help them.
I want to go back to the trust issue when you were in Afghanistan, and talk about rewiring. I can't believe that living like that so intensely in a danger zone has not affected your personalities, because you have to be very controlled in that environment, and for you to live and breathe with people. And I can't stress enough, you know, for anyone who's listening or watching that doesn't understand how intimate those environments are, and they are based on trust, to be in that situation where you can't quite do that, and for it not to affect you in your life afterwards.
I think they say, don't they, that you can't change personality, but you can't change people's personalities, but you can change their behaviours. And I think that stands right on time spent in Afghanistan on over 3 tours. You know, you go out there, and again, every nation that goes out there is as professional as the next. And you do, you know, there'll be certain points where you think you can trust someone 100%, and you think you know what the next move is. You think you know what they're going to do next, but you don't. And the next thing, something happens. You know, a vehicle explodes, or gunfire from one house, one building to another, or one tree line to another. And then that's when it becomes real. That's when it becomes, you then understand that sometimes it isn't all what it seems to be, and you think, why? And actually it's when your friend or colleague gets hurt or injured next to you that you become, I don't know, your behaviour changes at that point. I think your personality stays the same, and your behaviour changes sometimes to the country. You know, you go out there, and sometimes, as we said before, you're smiling and waving at children. You know, you can come out from patrol with a buddy in a bag on the back of your own vehicle. There's no smiling waves then. It's, you know, your behaviour changes because you feel like, you feel different, I think, at that point. And I wouldn't say you want revenge or anything like that. I think because you're professional, you do a job, and you take the next patrol in the same vein, in the same way you took the patrol where someone got injured and died. Fortunately, that's the nature of the job. It doesn't make it easy.
Did that happen to you?
Oh yeah, many times. Yeah.
And what are you able to tell me examples, and what happened in your head? Because you're a human. What happened?
Well, I think, again, the training kicks in massively. So, you know, we had a friend of mine, he was in a tree line just down the bottom, and I was kind of providing fire support from a high location. He got shot in between the eyes, he died instantly, and then my team had to go around and extract him. So I'm now putting my friend on a stretcher and putting him into a vehicle, and although there's a sense of emotion, you know, and I looked at him, I thought, no, that's my friend, he's now dead. But you've still got the enemy out there, the priority, unfortunately, and is not there. It's in front of you, because if it's not, then, you know, another friend or colleague is going to get the same end state as your friend that's gone already. So it's...
How do you deal with that, though? When are you going to deal with that?
Well, I think,
when can you deal with that?
For me personally, I didn't deal with it at all during the tour. You know, you have emotional moments to yourselves and in groups. But I remember when we finished that tour, and at the end of it, we got kind of bombed for a while, so we were late leaving Afghanistan, and we got stuck in. We went straight from Bastion, straight home, and within 36 hours, I was home from being bombed to being at home. So we missed the kind of support that you're supposed to get for, you know, a period of 12, 24 hours to understand what you've just been through. And I remember being at home thinking, 24, 36 hours ago I was getting bombed, and now I'm in my local pub with my dad serving me a pint and my friends over there, and they're all enjoying themselves and no one seems to care. You know, that was the initial thought. And it took me a few months to realise that it wasn't their fight. It was my fight. I made the decision to go and do those things and be in those circumstances, because a lot of times I blamed my friends and family for not understanding what's going on.
Were you angry?
Yeah, I think I was angry. Yeah, I was. I felt let down by my friends and family, and I thought actually my real friends and family were the people I'd just left. I'd just left Afghanistan, and for 3 months, you know, we were at a couple of months leave, I think, after. For the 2 months I was on leave, post Afghanistan, all I wanted to do is be back in Afghanistan with the same people.
Which is bizarre.
Which is strange, because it's the same situation that at the time you wanted to get out of. As soon as I left and no one else kind of understood what you'd been through, I wanted to go straight back with the same people and even relive the same stuff I'd just gone through again and again, to be with the same people that understood what I'd just been through. And it took me a while to realise that, like I've mentioned, it wasn't their fight. It wasn't for them to understand. I'm sure they care about, you know, military people and losing their lives and the injuries that they get, but it took me a while to understand that it was my fight with myself half the time, not with them.
Do you think you understand it now?
100%, yeah. You know, because that was my first tour in Afghanistan, and I've been back since, and, you know, I didn't feel the same after the second time, because I understood a little bit more. And, to be honest, the support post-tour, when it's very kinetic like I had, the support was there the second time around. It was just special circumstances, I think, the first time around, where we got off the ground very quickly, and next minute you're at home. I remember a firework going off at bonfire night, and I was driving my car 3 days after getting back, and it was fireworks, and one rocket went through a woodblock, and I crashed my car into a small bollard in the middle of the road, you know, the sleeping policemen, we call them. And because I just ducked, and I kept driving because you think you've got to get away. I just ducked and carried on driving, went through over a sleeping policeman, and it was that point thinking, what am I doing? You know, this is not right, you know. So it was a strange few months afterwards, but the only other incentive to make sure that, because I was a platoon sergeant when I returned from that tour or from my leave, and I thought, I have to be right, because I've got soldiers below me that may have gone through some similar thoughts during this period, and I need to get back to work to make sure that they're okay. So that was my kind of goal, making sure the people that were underneath me and above me were okay. So I had to be okay.
But you're not always.
Not always, but I think we're doing much more now, where, you know, people are talking much more about it than they have done 20 years ago, let's say. So, you know, you look back at the Falklands, you know, many people, you know, it was thought to be weak if you spoke about emotions or what you went through or what you thought, but nowadays it's the right thing to do, people to talk about it. And to be honest, this is really the only time I really openly spoke about it in an environment where I'm not sat with the people that went through it with me. Because usually, you know, as friends, we meet up, and usually over a beer, and we'll talk about, do you remember when, and do you remember when, and do you remember, you know, whether it be people who got injured and died or whatever, and we'll talk and we'll laugh and we'll reminisce on the good times and the bad times, and then you'll go away and you're not seeing for another year, and another year later you'll meet them. But this is probably the only time I've spoke with people that weren't there with me at the time, strangely. But it's good, because it'll probably help someone else, so I'm happy.
I suppose the burning question for me, that question of was it worth it, having experienced loss like you have, fear, looking at the political situation now, the dramatic fall of Kabul and the speed at which that happened, was it worth it?
For me, I would say it was worth it. To say it wasn't worth it, for me, would be... I would feel bad if I said it wasn't worth it for the people I've seen lose their lives doing what they did and doing what they loved doing as well. And again, there's political, and I'm talking about us, boots on the ground, friends left, friends right. Yes, it was worth it. You know, if you ask their families, they'll probably maybe have a different view. But for me, yes, it was worth it. If I look on a slightly higher level, I know that since 9/11, I don't think there's been a terrorist attack planned and executed from Afghanistan in the 20 years during the conflict. So, you know, if we'd not gone there, how many terrorist attacks and how many people would have died out of Afghanistan as opposed to in Afghanistan? So, you know, that's a question mark on that. And I think, is it worth it? I think that's still an open question because there's still time. You know, I think there's still time to see how the Taliban deal with it. You know, have we opened the minds of the Taliban? I think so, more so than 20 years ago. So I think there's many things at the slightly higher level than me and at the ground level where I, you know, when we were in Afghanistan, I think it was worth it.
There must have been times though, Stephen, in your head, in moments where you thought to yourself, this isn't worth it.
Yeah, I mean, like I've said, the times where your friends, you know, no longer going to see his family and friends, and they don't even know yet, but you can see your friend laid there still. You think, well, you do literally say to you, what the hell are we doing here? Let's just go home. But then, you know, when that passes and that anger or frustration and emotion passes you by and you switch back onto professional mode and you're back out on patrol again, then, you know, for me, I'm just doing my job again. Nothing about political, you know, I didn't care what's happening around me at home or anything like that. I was just focused on, I'm looking after this person here and this person here and making sure that laying down still in front of me doesn't happen or trying to prevent it. So it was just doing a job. And then, to be honest, I never thought, apart from them times, was it worth it until probably you've just asked me, if I'm honest. Even when, you know, it fell in the end, I still wasn't sure of my answer to, was it worth it? Apart from, like I've said, I think it was, because, you know, I think the terrorist attacks would have been spread across the globe had we not been there.
Thank you for joining us on The Fall of Kabul, A Soldier's Story. For more episodes and in-depth exploration, visit us on YouTube and on podcast streaming platforms.